Greetings YouTube and welcome to another weapons build. So, I thought I would make myself a post-apocalyptic Warhammer, something interesting. Now, I want to use this old tool handle, and the inspiration was two of these, which I think will make interesting impact heads, and I'm going to space them apart from each other, and they're going to both be in line like that, so they're going to be one there and one there. I'm going to use these nuts here as standoffs because I want that space to be filled up slightly so that the head is a little further out, and then that leaves just enough space on the back end for just the nut. I won't be using the washers at all to come flush there once I tighten it all down, so that'll be just fine. And these are just going to be free floating because they slide on there. Well, not free floating, they'll be tightened down, but they're not actually doing anything other than acting as spacers. To hold this to this while I'm working on it, I'm going to put in a couple of lag bolts, which will go in like that. I'm going to put this opposite the heads as a back spike. So I'm going to be using, that'll be the front, and then I'll screw this all the way in, and the end will be a spike. And I'm going to put obvious spike, so I'm going to put a point on this end. And I would like to take this and mount it here, sticking out, so it'll go in about 2.5, 3 inches, and then I'll cut it off, and then I'll grind a point onto the end. Though I could make it, it depends on how long I want it to be. Once I get it in there and I see it, I can always cut it off here and then grind the point onto the straight section. It won't matter at that point. And then the rest of it will just get recycled, because steel recycles really well. Now my initial plan was to use black square stock tubing, black steel. The problem is that my local big box store only carries up to 1 1/4 inch square stock tubing, and this thing, the inside diameter is roughly 1 3/8, and this is roughly 1 3/8. I'm going to have to sand this down a little bit to get it to fit in here. It's a little bit too snug at the moment. That's not a bad thing. I want to just take off just enough so it'll just barely fits in here. So I'll be working on that. And I like the aesthetics of the black steel more than I like this silver. It's still going to look cool, and let's be honest, it's going to be much easier to drill holes because all I'm going to have to really do, like on these, I don't have to do anything. Those holes are already the right size. I will have to open up the hole slightly to get these larger bolts in here and this one in here going 90 degrees to 180 degrees to these two. So you're going to get 3 holes have to be opened up there. So, and this will have to be drilled out as well. But that's easy. It's just drilling a straight hole in the end of the shaft. But they didn't have anything in black square stock tubing, so I got this silver stuff, which is more expensive. It was 20 bucks for a 3-foot section. It's not cheap. But I'm only going to need 16 inches, which is where that little red mark is right there. I think you can see that. Yep. And so I'm going to use 16 inches of that. And I'm probably going to put one there and then one in there. That way I get the depth I need for the bolt the lag bolt I want to put in the end. So those are going to be slightly asymmetric, but I don't really care if they're slightly asymmetric. That's not going to bother me, and it's going to look much shinier. Now, as far as the hardware goes, all of the hardware was either scrounged completely, as in like I pulled it out of a scrap bin, or purchased in lots. So I paid next to nothing to this. Like, I mean, I pulled these lag bolts out of a jar, you know, like a large peanut butter jar of lag bolts I bought at a yard sale for like $2. So these things cost me pennies. This is the same thing, and this I think has cost me like 50 cents. And again, really cheap stuff. And this I think I paid maybe $1 for, if that. It's a broken tool handle. I didn't pay much for it. Most people see this and they're like, what am I going to do with that thing? Well, I'm going to turn it into a weapon shaft. So the only real expense in this was here, and since I'm only using half of it, I've got about 10 bucks as far as this is concerned. So this does not meet my friend Mike's 10-pound limit, but it's still going to be a rather inexpensive build. And the big advantage is using this stuff. Even though it's a little bit more expensive, than the black square tubing is that it's got your holes drilled in it. So for someone that doesn't have a drill press and doesn't have any experience when it comes to laying things out, like how to lay out lines and figure out where you want it, having holes every inch that are already there that you may only have to open up slightly is a major improvement for a lot of people. That's going to make a lot of people's lives much easier. So if you are starting out in weapon building, maybe you want to look into things like this, because even though you might have a slightly more cost buy-in for the material, it's going to save you so much time and frustration in drilling holes and in laying things out. So you may get more benefit out of this, able to complete a project and have a sense of accomplishment over doing something from scratch. Now, I still hope I can lay my hands on stuff, as I know they make the stuff, because I've seen, you know, like tiny house trailers and stuff like that have been made out of 2-inch and 1.5-inch square stock tubing that was welded together. So I know it's out there. I just don't have it readily available to me in the midst of a pandemic. So you got to work with what you have. Yes, I went to a hardware store just to buy weapons things during a pandemic, so that was probably not the best thing in the world I've ever done. However, this idea has been sitting in my head for just ages, and I'm like, I got to get this idea out of my head. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get it out of my head, and we're going to build this thing, and hopefully it'll be cool, and that's the goal. The rule of cool. We're going to look for something cool. So this is the initial, and I actually took a before picture for my Instagram, and for probably I might actually put that up on my DeviantArt as well, the before picture, and then you'll see what this looks like afterwards. So yeah, so this is the latest project. I'm now going to go take a break because I need to get some lunch. And after lunch, I'm going to come back and we're going to start working on this. And hopefully, this will be a pretty fast project. It's one cut, and I have a chop saw designed for cutting metal, so that's real fast. Some sanding on this to get it to fit in here, and that should be pretty fast. And then opening some holes and then assembling the entire thing. Once I get the holes opened up and I get those two installed, I'll install the spike first because it'll be easier that way. But I can drill, and the probably longest thing I'm going to have to do on this project is going to be putting the points on these things. Because grabbing points on hardened steel is tedious, to say the least. You also need to make sure you have a coolant available, waterworks, so that the thing doesn't get too hot, either because it will burn you, and you don't want to just completely destroy the temper of the steel. Alrighty, so this is the first stage of my post-apocalyptic Warhammer build. Okay, first of all, I'd like to apologize that I missed some steps in there. I just got into the making process, and before I knew it, I was further along than I thought I wanted to be. I mean, not further along, but further along between shots. I'm where I want to be. But yeah, I apologize for that. That was not my intent. So I've installed this and put a point on it. Came out to a nice point too. That's a nice point right there. This whole thing is about 4 inches. At least it was 4 inches when I started. I don't know what it is now because I may have lost some when I made the tip. I've got 3 holes here. These 2 large holes, which are for the strike faces themselves, and then this hole, which is going this is going to be the spike. So I have to still grind this spike. I had to install it first to make it stable. Now I'll grind the spike. And to do that, I hogged out the bulk of the material with one of these. This is high performance metal grinding, and then I used a flap wheel to kind of hone it in. I got to be careful. That actually is dangerous. I guess that's kind of the point. Haha, get it, point. So this hole was pretty easy to do because this hole I have a bit that exactly opened up one of these holes perfectly. So I just needed to tap it in a little bit with a hammer. And then everything's perfect. These 2, however, they're much larger, and I did not have a drill bit that was the right size. So I put a drill bit in. It was the biggest one I had all the way through. And I thought, well, that's big enough for my finger. I can actually almost get my pinky all the way through there. That's kind of impressive. And then I just had to walk it. Now, I don't recommend that. I do not recommend walking a drill bit through a steel piece of tubing with wood inside. Not the safest thing in the universe, but it's what I did. And you can see the burn mark, even though I tried not to do any damage to this, just cutting this thing off. This stuff is so hard, I think I need a new abrasive wheel for my cutoff saw. But it does leave a really nice cut. It just, it heated up the metal something fierce. And I deburred it all and everything inside and out, so it was all nice and neat. And I decided that I didn't need the lag bolts for holding this to the shaft. I sanded the shaft a little bit, and then I just put it in there, and I just started tapping it on the ground on my cement floor. Doom, 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 little bit. It took me quite a while. It took me about 10 minutes. But I finally got it all the way out to the end. It is not going anywhere, particularly since it's going to have 3 bolts going all the way through it when I'm finished. And as you can see how much wood I had to hug out of here, this could not function without this here to support it. It just wouldn't. It would fall apart. This is holding this whole thing together. Not to mention making it cool and making it much more protected, because this is very reminiscent of what it would do in actual pole arms, pole axes, and warhammers. You would often see a strip of steel going down the front and the back, and that was both to help hold things on to the shaft, but it also protected the shaft from the stress of strikes, also from enemies blocking or attempting to disable or sunder, have to use a D&D term, to break the weapon that's being used against them. So this right here is just a really modern, spiffy version of that. So now it comes time to grind this off. So I'm going to get that grinding wheel back on my my angle grinder, and I'm going to take this off, and then I use a flap wheel to clean it up so it looks kind of like that when I'm done. This is going to be a little more difficult because this was easy because I could just rotate it and rotate it and rotate it. This doesn't have that advantage. And I really want to do it in here because there isn't any real way to hold it conveniently any other way. This is an awkward situation. We'll figure it out. I'll probably have to do here and then here, grind it this way and then that way, and then flip the whole thing around and grind this way and that way again. That's probably the easiest and safest way to do it. And because this is nice and sturdy, I can grab it in the vise. Yeah. Sorry, I'm kind of thinking out loud here. So yeah, so that's the next stage, which is going to be working on this. And this is nice and tight. It is not going anywhere. I've got 2 nuts and 2 lock washers, one on either side. This is very secure. And shortly, when this is done, then the last thing to do is just assemble the 2 strike faces in this, and we're done. So here we go. This is the completed Warhammer, and again, I apologize for missing the steps in there. Just get into the zone sometimes, and you don't know what's going on. You just gotta start working. So there you go. These are the 2 strike heads, and there are the spacers, the nuts I'm using as spacers, and then we have the spike at the back. And they all fit quite nicely in there. Just the hexagons line up really nicely in there. And I just clamped the 2 strike faces in the vise and then tightened up the back. So everything is very, very secure. This is not going anywhere. And it's got a nice heft to it. It really does. And that is going to be very good at penetrating armor. And that is good in case you have to make a thrust. And that's going to just stave things in a major way. This came out pretty nice. I really like the way this came out. The idea I had in my head is pretty much what I see here. I maybe should have gone up 1 more closer to the end, but you know, live and learn. I can always make another one of these things in the future if I want to. I guess I could technically drill another hole, move everything up one spot, but I don't know if I want to do that until I get the proper size bits, because using the bits the drill bit the way I did today is dangerous and not good for the bit or the drill or you. I did succeed in actually bending a 1/2-inch drill bit today while drilling out the holes to the first stage. So it can be dangerous if you're not careful. So there you go. I'm going to go outside, take some stills with this camera, and then take some stills with my phone, and upload them to both DeviantArt and my Instagram. Feel free to follow those if you'd like. So yeah, thanks for being here for my latest weapon build. I think it came out really nice and really damn dangerous.